Advocate Melville, thank you so much for joining us on CAB Talk today, for taking time out to speak to us. Now, it is Consumer Awareness Month. Why is it so important to have an entire month dedicated to this?
Yeah, I think around the world, consumers have been getting the thin end of the wedge. And it's been something which has come to the fore. Obviously, there have been other rights that have been important, particularly in a democratic society, but it's also very important that people's consumer rights, because those are the rights that they exercise on a daily basis. So your right to vote may only be 4 or 5 years, whereas your right to get a fair deal, a fair shake from the suppliers, that's something that you deal with on a daily basis.
Now tell us about your work. What do you do as the Ombud for Consumer Goods and Services?
Right, we deal with all complaints that are from that industry, so that's consumer goods and services. And it's a very broad spectrum of different entities that are covered by that. But basically, once a complaint comes to us, if it hasn't yet been sent to the supplier, we'll send it to the supplier and give them an opportunity to resolve it. And if they don't sort it out, then we'll have a look at it, and we could either send a product for testing, we could get in an independent mediator, we ourselves may facilitate the process, and that's what we do in most of the cases. And fortunately, the vast majority of cases do get settled without it really escalating to the point where we have to write a written judgment of any description in the form of a recommendation, and very few then escalate out of the system and go up to the National Consumer Commission, which is the regulator that also has authority to deal with complaints.
If you just give us a sense of the nature of complaints, just generally speaking, do you find that a lot of complaints that come through are petty, or do you have really serious, substantial complaints that are coming through from consumers?
Yeah, we get right across the board. We're trying to discourage the more petty ones. We certainly get those, which quite surprises me that people go to the effort to go and complain about a litre of milk or something like that. Also surprises me, of course, that the supplier didn't sort it out in the first place. But yes, we do get the more serious ones, and I think certainly from the people who are the lower income groups, if they buy a settee or something like that, that's a big purchase for them. So if it's not up to their expectation, that's something that they are going to complain about. So a lot of the stuff that does relate to big price tag items like furniture, although we're getting more and more cases referring to cell phones, defects in cell phones, because I think virtually everyone has at least one cell phone. As we know from a recent trial, some have more than that, but by and large, it's the furniture industry, and we get some stuff in respect of food, obviously appliances as well, white goods as they call them, what used to be the dishwasher, the stove and so forth. And quite often we have to send out for an independent expert to have a look at and give us an opinion on what the defect was and what the cause was.
Why are the volume of complaints coming through with regards to cell phones still high? Because that's been an ongoing trend, from my understanding.
Sure. From what I can see, the problem is that the suppliers are not applying the Consumer Protection Act consistently as far as the right to a refund or a replacement rather than a repair. So I think the tendency is, if something goes wrong, is to take it in for a repair. And then the other side of it is that often the supplier accuses the consumer of having caused the problem and it not been a factory defect. And so many of the cases turn on that.
Okay, you mentioned there are a lot of petty complaints that are coming through, and I think what's very interesting is when the CPA became law a couple of years ago, there was this impression that was created that the consumer is almost untouchable. Do you think consumers are very aware of their rights, or more has to be done to bring more awareness to their rights?
No, certainly. I think they miss out on a lot of rights that they're entitled to, but conversely, they believe they have rights that they don't have. So, for instance, if you go and buy something and you take it home and you change your mind, and you had the opportunity to try it on and examine it, you don't actually have a right in respect of the Consumer Protection Act. So those are the petty ones that we get, where someone goes home, changes their mind, and then they make a big fuss because the supplier doesn't have a policy which allows them to exchange it. So basically, under those circumstances, it's up to what the agreement was, what the return policy was, if there are any conditions that applied to that.
So consumers need to be made more aware of their rights in terms of the CPA. But I think also what's an interesting part of it is that it has changed the level of service between supplier and customer, and that's the breaking part of the CPA.
Yeah, I think that's happening to a greater extent with the big retailers. We find a lot less so with the smaller, the sort of one-person owner. I think that they've got a long way to go still.
Okay.